They said it was impossible. They said the paperwork was signed and the deal was done. They pointed at the contracts, the industry jobs, and the long record of allied interoperability and said, walk away and you will lose more than you gain. And yet, here we are. Canada found itself at a crossroads and made a choice that surprised many. This is the story of how Ottawa stepped back from a familiar path and started looking north and east for a different kind of answer. It is the story of why Gripen became more than a plane. It became a political statement, a strategic pivot, and a bargain with the future. First, we must set the scene. In early 2023, Canada confirmed it would procure the F35A as its future fighter. That decision had roots in decades of alliance politics, defense planning, and industrial ties. The F-35 was presented as the gold standard of stealth sensor fusion and modern air power. It promised seamless work with NATO partners and the United States, and came with deep industrial partnerships for Canadian companies. That commitment looked settled, but the world had other plans. Fast forward to a time of trade frictions and shifting geopolitics. Governments changed moods and priorities. Ottawa began to ask questions it had not asked loudly before. How dependent did Canada want to be on US software and logistics for air defense in its northern approaches? Did stealth alone solve the problems of Arctic surveillance and response? Could Canada afford the life cycle costs associated with a fleet of highly complex stealth fighters while still investing in Arctic infrastructure, domestic shipbuilding, and critical minerals? Those questions push the issue from a technical procurement file into the realm of sovereignty and national strategy. Enter the Gripen. Saab sent a clear message. The Gripen E was modern, affordable, and designed to be flexible. It had a reputation for being easy to maintain, able to operate from shorter runways, and built with the idea of distributed basing in mind. Saab pitched a partnership and not a one-sided sale. The company offered a strong promise of industrial cooperation with Canadian firms, including assembly and long-term maintenance work in Canada, for a country that was suddenly thinking about building capabilities at home. The offer hit a sweet spot. Saab also emphasized cost of ownership savings and a smaller logistics tail that could make sense for a nation stretched across vast Arctic distances. But the move was never only about cost. There were heavier political currents at play. Ottawa was wrestling with a growing unease about absolute dependence on U.S. defense supply chains. News stories and public hearings revealed that canceling or downsizing an F-35 order could provoke serious pushback from Washington. The engine used by Gripen is U.S. built, and that gives the United States a lever that can limit export of critical parts or software. Any pivot would have to navigate that reality. Policymakers in Ottawa had to weigh the optics of asserting more sovereignty against the tangible risk of American disapproval, affecting broader trade and defense cooperation. So, how did Ottawa reach the point of choosing Gripen over the F-35? It was less a single dramatic moment and more a gathering of smaller decisions and pressures. The government ordered reviews and audits. It sought to measure life cycle costs, training infrastructure, and the industrial upside. It listened to regional governments and to the Canadian defense industry, which saw an opportunity to scale up work on a less complex but still modern fighter platform. It listened to the military, which warned that interoperability mattered and that NORAD and NATO commitments were not casual promises. The final decision rested on a blend of politics, economics, and practical defense needs. Recent public reporting shows that Canada committed to taking an initial tranche of F-35 aircraft, while still examining options for later buys, which opened a window for alternative solutions. That partial commitment lowered the political cost of changing course for the rest of the fleet. Now let us talk plain language about capability. The F-35 brings stealth and deep sensor fusion. That means it is designed to slip past high-end radar systems and to create a merged picture of the battle space that pilots and commanders can use in real time. For high-intensity conflict against a near peer, it is extremely valuable. The Gripen does not promise the same level of low observability, but it brings many other strengths. It is cheaper to buy and operate. It has a modern suite of sensors and can carry advanced weapons, including long-range missiles used by NATO partners. It is built to be easy to maintain and to operate from austere conditions. That makes it useful not only in a contested high-intensity fight, but also in persistent patrols of remote territory and in quick surge operations. For Canada, that combination mattered. Political and budgetary calculus placed a higher premium on persistent presence and on building domestic capacity. than on maximizing stealth alone. There was also an industrial argument that mattered in the halls of power. Saab offered a package that promised work for Canadian companies. It proposed local assembly, the transfer of know-how, and a long-term sustainment plan involving Canadian firms. Compare that to the F-35 industrial footprint, which had already generated hundreds of millions in contracts for Canadian suppliers. Those existing contracts complicated the choice. Canceling or reducing the F-35 order would ripple through Canadian aerospace industries and business ties. Ottawa had to balance the immediate gains of Gripen-related work against the unrest that could be created among existing F-35 contractors and their workers. It was a political tightrope. We also must not forget the international dimension. Sweden had, in recent years, deepened its cooperation with NATO, and its new membership in the alliance changed how Ottawa and other capitals thought of Swedish systems. A Gripen bought from Sweden could be framed as acquiring NATO-compatible equipment, while still diversifying away from US dominance in procurement. In parallel, Canada leaned more on relationships in the Nordic region as it looked to shore up Arctic defenses against a more assertive Russia. The optics of buying a plane that was already adapted to cold weather operations, and that came with promises of regional cooperation, fitted this strategic narrative. Politicians in Ottawa could pitch the Gripen not as a rejection of the United States, but as a pragmatic diversification that strengthened Canada's Arctic defense posture. Of course, critics had a ready list of problems. They pointed out that a mixed fleet complicates maintenance training and logistics. If Canada kept some F-35s and added Gripens, it would have to support two very different technologies. That raises costs and can reduce readiness in the short term. The military argued for simpler solutions that prioritized interoperability with long-standing allies, particularly when it came to systems like NORAD that require seamless communication and doctrine. The other worry was that the Gripen still used a US engine, meaning the United States retained potential control over exports and support. That undercut the sovereignty argument used by some to justify moving away from American equipment. These criticisms were real, and they kept the debate alive until the final vote. National Security Journal, +1. Now imagine the scene in Defense Headquarters. Staffers lined up briefings on cost comparisons. Pilots walked through simulator sessions with both aircraft. Industry reps sketched job plans, and union leaders lobbied for protection of workers who stood to lose F-35-related contracts. Diplomats across Ottawa sent notes about the likely reaction in Washington and in allied capitals. For months, the debate was not a single flash, but a long, slow pressure cooker of analysis, emotion, and interest. At its core, it was about what kind of future Canada wanted to build. Did Canada want a fleet that mirrored the most advanced American features, or did it want a fleet better scaled to its geography budget and industrial goals? The decision to choose Gripen over the F-35 was thus a bundle of narratives wrapped into a policy move. Pragmatism played a large part. Gripen promised a lower price tag and a lower operating cost. That freed money for other priorities such as Arctic radar infrastructure, icebreakers, and supply chain resilience. The industrial partnership offered a visible celebration of Canadian sovereignty. The political signal was loud. Ottawa was saying it will not be a passive buyer in global defense markets, but an active partner in building capabilities. And the timing mattered. As global tensions rose and supply chains proved fragile, the idea of more domestic assembly and control over maintenance took on new urgency. What about the immediate military picture for Ukraine? Many viewers are wondering how this Canadian decision affects the war in Europe. At first glance, the Gripen does not change the calculus for Ukraine. The F-35 is not a magic bullet for the war in Ukraine. Stealth fighters operate differently from the multi-role jets that have dominated the battlefield there. Ukraine's needs are immediate artillery, anti-air systems, drones, and training to strike robustly and persistently. The Gripen has strengths that could matter indirectly. It can free up allied resources for other theaters and provide a flexible platform for training and coalition operations. If Canada and partners pursue a distributed model of air power, it can make coalition support more adaptable. But the dramatic impact on the battlefield in Ukraine is limited. The real effect is geopolitical. Canada choosing Gripen signals that allies are willing to diversify procurement and that Western support networks for Ukraine will include new industrial partners and training arrangements. That matters for long-term strategy and coalition resilience. A thoughtful observer will also notice that Canada's move is not a unique case. Other countries have toured the same ground. Purchasing a fighter is not a single choice about speed and stealth. It is a complex trade between operational needs, budget, industrial policy, and foreign policy. Several NATO members have explored mixed fleets or shifted attention to European suppliers to boost local industry or to gain better control over technology. Yet each country's geography and political economy make its own choice unique. For Canada, the Arctic and the dispersed nature of the country's territory push the conversation in a particular direction. Let us take a moment to deal with the fear that this choice will harm relationships with the United States. That fear is real and serious. The U.S. has repeatedly indicated that abandoning deep purchases of American systems could have consequences in terms of access to certain technologies and even to broader trade relations. Those threats were part of the calculus. Ottawa's decision, therefore, had to be careful. It did not come from a place of spite, but from a desire to play a complex hand well. By buying an initial batch of F-35s and still negotiating terms for subsequent purchases, Canada hedged its bets. It preserved key interoperability while creating a legitimate case for diversification. That approach was an attempt to keep doors open rather than to shut them. Flight global +1. What happens next? Implementation is the hard part. If Canada goes forward with a Gripen program, it will need to build a supply chain, ramp up maintenance facilities, and train pilots on a new mission set. That work will take years, and it will require sustained political will. Canada will also negotiate the details of industrial partnerships to ensure that promised jobs and transfers of technology actually show up on the shop floor. On the diplomatic front, Ottawa will have to manage relations with the United States, carefully making clear that this was a considered strategic decision and not a rejection of allied cooperation. At the same time, Canada will likely invest more heavily in Arctic sensors and logistics. The Gripen's ability to operate from dispersed bases means Canada can plan for more resilient and flexible northern defense. That will be the real test of whether this decision was smart. Can Ottawa turn a procurement choice into a broader strategy that protects its northern approaches and builds a homegrown industrial base? If yes, the Gripen may be judged by history as the plane that helped Canada reclaim operational sovereignty. If not, it will be seen as a costly detour. There are risks that we must not sugarcoat. Mixed fleets can produce long-term inefficiencies. Political changes can undo industrial agreements. Export controls and the globalized nature of modern systems mean that no purchase is free from external influence. And the F-35 remains a dominant platform for Western air forces. Canada's smaller or different fleet will still need to operate with allies, and that requires careful technical and tactical integration. So what is the shocking truth about Canada's choice? The shock is less about the plane and more about what the plane represents. It is shocking because it shows a middle power exercising choice in a very public way. It is shocking because it flips the script about procurement as simply a technical bureaucratic exercise. Instead, it lays bare the deep connections between defense choices and national identity, industry, and foreign policy. Choosing Gripen over the F-35 was never merely about whether one airframe was better in a dogfight. It was about who builds a country's defense, how it pays for presence across a vast geography, and how it balances alliance loyalty with domestic resilience. If you want to boil it down to a sentence, it would be this. Canada chose Gripen because it wanted a package that combined capability with control and cost savings, while opening a door to a different kind of industrial partnership. That choice was enabled by partial commitments to the F-35, which left space to pivot, and by a changing geopolitical conversation that made diversification more attractive. The trade-offs were real, and the risks remain. What Canada bought was not a silver bullet, but a strategic posture. In the months and years to come, watch for three things. First, look at how quickly Ottawa converts industrial promises into real factories, contracts, and training programs. That will tell you whether Gripen is a political slogan or a long-term plan. Second, look at Canada's Arctic investments. If Gripen comes with stronger northern radars, icebreakers, and logistics, then the purchase will align with the stated threat picture. Third, look at Ottawa's diplomacy with Washington. If Canada manages to keep interoperability and industrial cooperation alive while diversifying, then the decision will be a rare diplomatic balancing act that paid off. Finally, remember that jets are symbols as much as they are tools. Countries choose aircraft to send messages to their publics, to their allies, and to their adversaries. Canada's message was clear. It will not trade away sovereignty for simplicity. It will protect its north. It will try to build more at home. That is a bold claim, and it will be expensive to keep. The Gripen is a pragmatic aircraft for a pragmatic moment. Whether it becomes the aircraft that reshapes Canadian defense depends not on the manufacturer, but on the political courage to follow through. For Ukraine, the immediate battlefield will not change overnight. But for the broader coalition, the move signals a willingness to experiment with procurement, diversify supplies, and to find creative ways to support long-term resilience. That kind of flexibility can matter more in the decades to come than the particular paint scheme on any single fighter. This is a story of strategy, not spectacle. It is the story of how a country measured its map and its future, asked hard questions, and made a choice that felt risky because it was honest. Canada did not pick the Gripen because it was flashy. Thank you for watching this deep dive into a story that is still unfolding. If you like this breakdown, share it, subscribe us, and let me know which angle you want explored next: industry impact, Arctic strategy, or the Ukraine connection.